There's a moment when disrespect hits you, and something inside doesn't break anymore. You feel it, yes, but it doesn't shatter you into pieces like it used to. This isn't numbness. This isn't denial. This is a woman who has learned to stay centered even when the world forgets her worth. What we're exploring today goes beyond the usual advice about boundaries or standing up for yourself. We're going into the deeper territory that Carl Jung mapped out for us. This is where real change happens, not in reaction, but in awareness. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why spiritually evolved women respond to disrespect in ways that might seem strange, but are incredibly powerful. This will change how you handle relationships, protect your energy, and keep your dignity without losing yourself. Jung believed our deepest wounds often become our greatest teachers, and nowhere is this clearer than in how we learn to dance with disrespect. Picture this. Someone speaks to you in a way that would have sent you into defense mode before, or made you want to explain everything, or just collapse inside. But now something different happens. You feel the sting. You acknowledge it. Then you watch it pass through you like weather through an open sky. This is the first gift of spiritual maturity. Jung called this developing consciousness, the ability to witness what's happening to you without becoming completely lost in it. The first shift, feeling without breaking. When disrespect shows up at your door, the spiritually evolved woman doesn't pretend it doesn't hurt. She doesn't put on a brave face or jump straight into forgiveness mode. Instead, she practices what Jung would call conscious suffering. She lets the feeling exist without making it mean something about her worth. The pain is real, but she knows it's temporary. More importantly, she knows it's not who she island. This is crucial. Feeling disrespected and being disrespectful are completely different things. The woman who gets this has already taken the first step toward real power. She can say to herself, I feel this and I see this, but this feeling isn't who I am. Think about it like this. When you touch something hot, your hand pulls back automatically. You don't spend time analyzing why the stove was hot or what it means about you as a person. You just protect yourself. The same goes for emotional disrespect. But most of us have been trained to ignore our natural protective responses. The spiritually mature woman has reclaimed this natural wisdom. She feels the heat of disrespect and responds without making it about her value as a human being. This is what Jung meant by integrating the personality. All parts of her experience are welcome, but none of them get to hijack who she island. The second shift, looking inward. As you start practicing this conscious feeling, something amazing happens. You begin to notice patterns not just in how others treat you, but in what triggers your deepest reactions. This leads to the second big shift spiritually evolved women make. Instead of focusing on the person who disrespected them, they turn their attention inward. They ask, what old wound just got activated? Jung talked a lot about projection and shadow work. He understood that other people often act like mirrors, reflecting the parts of ourselves that are still unhealed or hidden. When someone disrespects you, yes, their behavior is wrong and unacceptable, but the spiritually mature woman asks another question. Why does this particular kind of disrespect hit me so deeply? This isn't blaming yourself. This isn't taking responsibility for other people's bad behavior. This is taking responsibility for your own healing and growth. Your strongest emotional reactions often point to your deepest chances for freedom. Maybe the disrespect triggers an old wound about not being seen or heard. Maybe it hits that tender place where you still doubt your own value. The woman who has learned to work with these triggers doesn't waste energy trying to change the other person. She uses the activation as valuable information about where her next healing opportunity lies. Jung believed that what we don't make conscious will keep running our lives from the shadows. Every time you're disrespected, you have a choice. React from the old wound, which keeps you trapped in the same patterns, or use the moment as a doorway to deeper understanding. The third shift, when not to explain. This brings us to one of the hardest parts of spiritual growth: learning when not to explain yourself. Most of us have been taught that if someone doesn't understand our values, we need to educate them. We launch into explanations and justifications, trying to prove our worth. But the spiritually mature woman has learned something revolutionary. Not everyone can see your light, and it's not your job to convince them. Jung wrote about psychological types, how people have fundamentally different ways of processing information and relating to the world. Some people simply aren't equipped to appreciate certain qualities or perspectives. Trying to force understanding where there's no capacity for it is like trying to explain color to someone born blind. It's not their fault, they can't see it, but it's also not your job to exhaust yourself trying to make them see. The woman who gets this learns to save her energy. She stops casting pearls before swine, as the saying goes. She realizes her explanations often fall on deaf ears. And worse, they can actually weaken her power by putting her in a position where she has to beg for recognition. Instead, she learns the art of letting her presence speak for itself. She stops trying to convince and starts embodying. She stops explaining her worth and starts living it. The fourth shift: energy and boundaries. Perhaps the most profound shift spiritually evolved women make is in how they use their bodies and energy to communicate boundaries. Words matter, but energy is primary. Jung recognized that we communicate far more through our presence than through our words. The woman who has learned to embody her boundaries doesn't need to announce them constantly. Her energy field does the talking. Think about someone you know who naturally commands respect. They don't demand it, argue for it, or beg for it. There's something in their presence that communicates their value clearly. This isn't about being intimidating or cold. It's about being so anchored in your own worth that it becomes undeniable. This kind of presence comes from inner work. It comes from healing the places inside where you doubt your own value. It comes from learning to inhabit your body fully, to speak your truth, and to move through the world with quiet confidence. The spiritually mature woman might not say a word when someone disrespects her, but her energy will shift. Her attention might withdraw. She might simply leave the conversation or the room. These aren't dramatic gestures. They're natural responses from someone who knows their value and won't participate in interactions that diminish it. The final freedom. The last and most profound transformation rarely announces itself with fireworks. It's not a loud victory or grand declaration. Instead, it emerges quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. She simply no longer needs to win. She no longer needs to be right, and she no longer feels compelled to prove her worth to those who refuse or can't see it. This liberation from the endless hunger for external validation isn't just a milestone, it's freedom itself. It's the moment when she discovers that the foundation she's been seeking outside was waiting within her all along. Jung spoke about the ego's insatiable desire for recognition, but he also pointed toward transcendence, the movement from ego's dependency to the self-sovereignty. For the woman who reaches this stage, worth is no longer controlled by others. It flows from a deeper source. This doesn't mean she becomes numb to how others treat her. She still feels the sting of cruelty and the warmth of kindness, but their treatment no longer dictates her identity. She can see disrespect for what it is, poor behavior, without absorbing it as a verdict on her value. From this space of inner sovereignty, her responses to disrespect become almost effortless. Boundaries don't come from emotional strain, they emerge naturally. She doesn't need to psyche herself up before saying no. She simply acts from knowing, and in that knowing, she becomes unshakable. This is individuation, Jung's vision of the human soul ripening into its true form. It's not about perfection. It's about becoming unmistakably, unapologetically who you are. For the awakened woman, learning to dance with disrespect, not deny it, not collapse before it, not retaliate against it, but to meet it with consciousness, becomes one of the most powerful initiations into her authentic self. The journey continues, moment by moment, choice by choice. Each conscious response deepens your roots. Each chosen boundary strengthens your being. This is the path to true freedom, the freedom to remain yourself in any situation, to love without losing dignity, and to stand without needing approval. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe, not just for more content, but to join a growing space where truth, healing, and self-discovery matter. This is Psyche Thera, and your journey is just beginning.